coming during the great outage. I'm glad you could find out about the program that's happening. You may have seen this calendar hung up around town. We will have another calendar like this coming out soon. Our next artist will be arriving before internet returns to Sitka. So Tina Harnack, she's a youth leader, and her first talk is going to be happening on Friday, September 13th at 2 p.m. So please come and hear her speak if you can. It will not probably be advertised due to the internet issues. We'd love to have you back. Thanks for coming today to hear James Ooch. We've been lucky to have James Esh Hart here for about 3 weeks. And we're fortunate to have the Alaska Native Artist Residency Program that brought him here, sponsored by the Friends of Sheldon Jackson Museum, National Endowment for the Arts, and the Airlines Foundation. We're grateful for those supporters and also private donors. We'll begin with the land acknowledgement, and then I'll share a little bit about James. We'd like to acknowledge and express our appreciation to the indigenous people of Tlingit who have occupied this land for longer than any of us can imagine. Who after 250 years of colonization are graciously sharing this land with us. Thank you. James began his artwork intensively after he started taking a pattern making class with Wayne Price in 2014, and he also created 2 traditional ocean-going canoes under Wayne's tutelage. And he is currently serving his community as the president of the Chilkoot Indian Association's Tribal Council. He also operates his own business titled 3 Mile Designs, and in his spare time he enjoys time with his niece and nephew and coaching basketball in Haines, where he's based. So with that, I'd like him to introduce himself to you all. Thank you so much, James. This is his last presentation before he leaves Sitka.
Thank you, Jackie. Tlingit chish pikat yuhan kunach stuga hatiti. Very grateful, very thankful for you all to be here. My name is James Esh Hart. I'm Tlingit. I like to put my Tlingit name in between my English name because there is another, a Jim Hart from Haida, who's a Haida artist. So I share a name with him. He's an amazing artist. He's got some beautiful work. But I had to figure out how to differentiate the 2 of us. So that's how I like to do it. Today I'm going to be kind of talking about this Bentwood chest that is in the collections here. It's a really special piece to me because one of the first, I took some classes with Davey Boxley, David Jr., and he's a Tsimshian artist. He's very top notch. He's going to be one of the best formline artists of this generation, in my opinion. So, and he's a wonderful teacher, wonderful person. So, in that class that I took a beginning class, and then another beginning class, and an advanced class. In that advanced class, we drew this figure on the bottom. So up top is the both frontal kind of view sides of the chest, and on the bottom is kind of what I call like a signature aspect on the sides of the chest. So they always differentiate a little bit, and they never fill that whole space. With Bentwood boxes and chests, you're always working at filling a space. But for whatever reason, on the side of pretty much all boxes, unless they tweak things a little bit differently, it's always going to be this smaller little figure that doesn't fill the space. But this person decided to take it to the next level. The design, to do this design work into a circle is really challenging. I did this drum and I didn't maximize the space. I kind of, I would call it cheating a little bit. You're not really aiming to make this, both these pieces actually, I didn't max out the space. I chose to do that differently because I know what I should be doing, but I get the liberty now of I know how to max out space, so I take some liberties from time to time and create things that are floating. But really, just like in this picture here, you're maxing out a design field. And so on the sides, this he's filled in, he's made a circle, and then there isn't quite, a main figure in this side piece. It's just formline put together in a really beautiful, spectacular way. I think most formline artists that have designed enough to really understand much of the principles can really, really appreciate what this artist has done. So I'm just going to go through kind of an approach. This is this is going to be a floating design, but there's always going to be, and I don't know how well these pictures show up, but come out here. They don't show up great. But there's a main ovoid here, and through every design there's going to be just this main ovoid that really pops out, and it dictates the thickness of the rest of the design. I'll grab my drum. So yeah, here in this drum, this is the main ovoid here, and throughout the rest of the design, I'm going to use the elements from this main ovoid and disperse them throughout. So here's a U form coming off, and that's the beak. The thickness here on the top end of this U form is the thickness that I use here. The legs of this U form are the thickness that I've used on the bottom of the ovoid here and here. Same thing right here and here. So there's these principles that we follow, and off this main ovoid, it tells you how things are going to be lined up throughout the rest of the design. Placement is very big too, and also if you get too thick, there's these ways to break up the space and relieve that space from being too thick. Here it was kind of about the same thickness here, so I decided to break the space and put a little split in there. If this whole eye was all blacked out, it'd be way too thick. So this one is broken up. Since it's a smaller design and a big kind of head, I felt like putting another figure inside was the correct choice here. Again, this kind of cheek area was too thick, so put in what's called a trineg, so 3 negative spaces here, here, and here. And that's really, when you go through, here's another split right here. This main ovoid is the biggest aspect, and every design has a main ovoid, usually the eye. Okay. And that second figure is the finished kind of design. So you find your main ovoid, sketch the layout, create a second draft, and this is like today. This is how I approach it, and it really makes you wonder how some of these pieces were created without all these special tools that I have. I have paper, trace paper that I'm using. Here's what I'm working on right now. This one I am maxing out the space, so I'm making sure I do that. But I have these tools that I can use to really create as close as I can to perfectly symmetrical ovoids and full design fields. From there, I get to my final draft, and then I create a stencil. That first picture is my cutout stencil. So this is on I think it's a 24 by 18 canvas. And before I would just use trace paper, and if you draw on one side of the trace paper, put it onto a canvas like this, I could draw and then draw right over that same piece that I have here, and it'll show up on the canvas. I used to do that and not create a stencil, but I ended up with a lot of different lines, a lot more what I call blending and merging. So I would draw half of it, put it on with my trace paper, flip it, and then trace it over again. And it never really quite would line up as so I would have to move into the blend and merge. And I don't really like that. It's not as clean. When I go to paint it, things just they end up wonky to me. And if I create this stencil, I have a clear idea of what's happening, and I don't have to do that blending and merging like I was talking about. And it's really every step of the way is so important to create the cleanest. If it's just a sketch, so be it. I've got some really, really rough sketches that you wouldn't think. They're not pretty, but it's just to get the idea down. Then usually it takes me about three edits to get to my final draft. From there, once I have the final and I'm okay with it, I cut the stencil out, put it onto the piece that I'm going to be working on, and then move right into painting. So there's this whole long process that happens before I even touch the paint, and a lot of people don't really understand that aspect, and they go, oh, goodness, and I'll be honest, I can hardly afford my original pieces. It's pretty, they're pretty spendy, but the time and effort that goes into creating, the best work that I possibly can. I'm not here to put out something that's just sloppily put on a canvas, just painted like, oh, okay, well, I got to paint this now. No, this is very intentional, and I put a lot of effort into getting everything as clean as possible. Okay. Is there any questions so far? Yes.
This is just a technical question. With the stencil and then the final design, how come there's some pieces of the stencil that don't get? Is that just to hold together the stencil?
Yes, that's the hold together. It'll start breaking, and then too, when you go in to trace it, it'll kind of move around. So making sure you have these different pieces that hold it in place. And I can go through and clean those lines back up. I don't draw every single one of those straight lines that I have in there that are holders. And I'll be honest, the first time I traced, my paddle carving class with Wayne, I drew every single line, and he had those things in there too. And I was like, what am I supposed to paint here? And I had no clue what was going on. So, but it's harder to see all the lines if you weren't the one who cut it out. So, yeah. Okay. Now I'm going to move into this object. So I'll get up again. With these chests, and two here, I have this. If you all would want to pass it around at all. So this is the main ovoid right here. It's mirrored on this same side over here. And then from there, you go down, create the cheekbone here, and then the bottom of this kind of jawline. A lot of times these figures are kind of generic. They're not necessarily a bear or a whale or anything else, unless there's intentional elements that are put into it. If it had a couple like buck teeth coming down, you go, oh, that's a beaver. Or there are different ways to kind of represent a whale, or if it did have some sharp teeth, you go, oh, okay, that's probably a bear. And then two, the claws are the other aspect. These are the little hands. Usually there's only hands on one side. But the hands too, they'll represent something. Those are the two places that you really look at and clue into as far as what's going on with the mouth and what's going on with the hands. And those will give you the clues that you need in order to really figure out what kind of animal this might be. So throughout here, then I would move up to this spot right here, create this ovoid and this ovoid down here, and then represent this space right here and break it up. I could kind of show on this too. This is a different rendition of a different box, but yeah, once I get these main figures put down, then that's when you could start filling in these spaces. I do all of the main figure first, and then everything that fits inside of it, that's what gets drawn next. I never skip to the next part. Otherwise, you start running into issues, and honestly, you kind of pigeonhole yourself because once you start putting in, like, let's say, some dashed lines in one area, that means in another area you're going to have to put in these dashed lines. So seeing how everything's fit together and laid out first is really super important to getting to your final design. So
I have a question. I imagine the wood sometimes determines how the carving comes out, right? I mean, if it breaks or something, do you find yourself changing that design in the middle, or no?
Well, I mean, the fun thing is the design changes from start to finish.
Okay. Yeah.
It does not. It's not one thing until it's painted, and even then, even from the first sketch to second draft, even when I go through and trace this out, it's going to change just slightly every single time. And then even when I come in and put the paint in, it changes just ever so slightly. So the design really does change throughout the whole process until you get to the very final spot. What was I? Oh, the other fun aspect with the chests are these sides are always different. So these are the front facing sides. They're always very, very similar. The layout is almost identical at times, but there'll be different little elements within it. Like this one has the hands here. There aren't any hands in this one, or claw. This figure in the middle is slightly changed. This one's a little bit higher, whereas this one's lower. And one will be a lot more kind of broad, a little bit more attention seeking, and the other side will be just a little bit more delicate, I'd say. Or they just kind of, it's not as attention grabbing as one side. Then two, the sides of the boxes are always going to be different. You don't hardly ever see the same exact design on the same sides. And if you see in that picture, they are like, the layout is pretty much exactly the same. There's a one or two small changes within it, but there are changes within the secondary elements in these two pieces right here. If you look at it, just glance, oh, look, you go, oh, these are the same, and then move on. But if you sit down and really have a look, there's different things going on, I like that because it's challenging because you have to do the same thing again, but just tweak it just ever so slightly. So this is a master. Whoever did this piece was a master. It's pretty apparent. You could look at a lot of different pieces in a lot of different boxes and kind of get a understanding or a feel of where that artist is at in their career. And this one, you go, oh, he was at that stage where began to play with things and a little bit more free flowing and imaginative. You know, it's hard to really get into that space of pushing the boundaries on the art form, and you could see it at times.
But if you wanted to say portray bear or a certain character, are there elements that all designs would include that would say to you, oh, that's bear?
That's a tough question. I mean, it is a shared art form from, a little bit north of Washington up to Yakutat, Haines. So all these different communities kind of portray things, and they have different clan systems and different inspirations. So there are things that you can do to represent things, but you'll find that they slightly change. But I mean, if I was to do a bear, I would put a canine here and a canine here, and instead of having an open palm here, I would put something that was more, rounded, clawed, and that would give you the clues to where you'd say, oh, okay, that's probably a bear. And there's actually a really great book out there. It's it's an interview with Bill Holm and Bill Reed. Bill Holm wrote The Analysis of Form, and it was a book about Northwest Coast art, and that's where the term formline came from. And Bill Reed was a famous Haida. Pretty much, he did a lot of engraving. That's what he's most famous for. But they took turns looking at these different pieces all throughout the Northwest Coast, and they both had their own little blurb about what this, and it was a conversation. Oh, I think this looks like that, or and the funny thing was, Bill Reed was a lot more relaxed about it, and was like, he would just be like, you can't tell, you can't, whereas Bill Holm was a lot more working towards being definitive and, oh no, that's this, or no, that's that. So I like that banner because it's two professionals that really know what they're talking about, but two different ways of looking at it. And I'm more so in that category of, really, if you weren't there or you don't know the story personally, you're not really going to know what this design is. So we could make educated guesses, but really, if you weren't there and you don't have the story, or the person didn't give you that story personally, I think it's going to be really, really challenging to have a definite answer on what you're looking at. Any other questions? So I think that's kind of where I'm at. So I am at the end of this little discussion, but here are some different photos of some of my work. So yes.
So I haven't seen the chest, but if there's color added, can you talk about how the color in the paints? Do you have much to say about that?
Yeah. Let's see.
Like ones that still persist today, like that they want to use. Yeah.
This red and black, that's the most kind of traditional colors that you'll see. There are different colors within Chilcat blankets. There's a yellow element that's added into, and then too with this colorway, you could add in kind of a copperish teal color, and that would be in these what's called tertiary areas. This would be dished out. This would be carved out right here and in here. This too could have that teal color. And then there is a space in here that could have that teal color. So there's 3 colors that really that you could use. Some people elect to use them all 3. Some people don't, depending on the design or what they're carving on. So I haven't really gotten too much into using the teal yet, but mainly it's the carved out aspects in these designs. So the black, that's the primary. That's kind of what's the bones of the figures, and the red is the secondary elements. That's kind of these places that fill in the space. So, and then the third color, the teal.
I'm interested in the tools
Yeah.
that they used a long time ago.
Yeah.
And maybe you could tell us what you used. And
Yeah. I mean, I have a growing toolbox, you know, and I use acrylics for my paint. I don't. Here are my paintbrushes here. Mainly for a lot of this, I use a number 2. So I feel like a number 1, and I've been learning a lot more about painting. I didn't have any kind of teaching on what paints to use or which paintbrush to use. It's been a learning process for me, but I found that a number 2 works best for me. I go through and I'll do an outline throughout this whole entire design. So I'll just run this outside line with this number 2 all the way around, and then go back in and fill it in. And I'll still typically use the number 2 if it's a design this size, because if I use a bigger brush, I'll start getting sloppy. And if I use a number 1, it doesn't hold as much ink in there for me, so I have to go back and forth a little bit more. But the number 2 has kind of been my sweet spot. I do use chainsaws when available and ready. There's a lot of people who like to make comments about stuff like that. You know, if people had access to a chainsaw a couple hundred years ago, they'd go, "Wow, look at this!" Right. So when there's tools available, you know, people use them, and
I imagine a variety of chisels,
yeah,
V-shapes, and all kinds of different things.
Yep, lots of gouges and
Hammers,
chisels, hammers. Yeah, and then too, I'm working at getting into engraving, so there's a whole other tool set that comes into play. I have made a couple
on bone or ivory, or
silver engraving.
oh, silver.
Yeah. I did get to make my own adze blades and carve my own elbow adzes. That was kind of like when I did my apprenticeship with Wayne Price. That was the homework, or the prerequisite was to finish an elbow adze. So we went out the highway, found some vine maple, and found the right trees, and he showed us his adze and was like, "Here, make this." So we did, and when we finished, and they found an old leaf spring and cut out the shape of the adze and the adze blade. And my cousin's actually pretty good at blacksmithing, so we made our adzes together. And once we finished, he said, "Okay, now you can come to Huna and work on these 2 40-foot dugouts with me." So yeah, there's adze blades and yeah, it's a growing, any tool that can help me be more efficient, I will gladly take it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like your ancestors would do the same thing.
That's a fact. Yeah. So, yeah.
So traditionally though, they just use their own steadiness of hand, or do they know of any possible guides they used at the time?
Yeah, there were different stencils, and I don't know who all used them or when they used them, but there are pieces in different museums that they have where they've cut out out of bark. Typically, I think it's mostly bark. So cut out their different ovoids out of bark, and then we're able to put it on here. But it wasn't a full design like I've done. So I haven't seen anything like that. So that's what really makes me go, man. You can tell there's a center line on some pieces, and it's like, was it string? What was it? Well, how did they proportion things so well and accurately without these modern tools? And I imagine it's just feeling. Once you get to that stage of mastery, I think it's more of a feeling, but I couldn't tell you because I'm not there yet. Yes.
I have a couple questions. I've been noticing that drum for a long time because I've been here several times.
Mm-hmm.
And everything has a story,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm just wondering what the brown on the drum, what that story is.
Oh, this part down here. I actually got this one pre-made. So again, if there's somebody out there who makes drums, I will gladly support them so I can get to the next stage of my process quicker. And then two, I have a hard time figuring out sometimes what it is as far as the stories, and I've kind of come to my own conclusion on these all have a different spirit, and that spirit came out of me somehow. And do I know the story behind it? No, but does it have a feeling? And is it in the world present now? Yes. So I'm still really figuring. Sometimes there is something that comes to me, and I'm sitting and working, and something creeps up on me, and it comes to me, and like, oh, okay, like this one, I called showing teeth. So as I was working on it, I just had this feeling of showing teeth, and it's something that's come up in my life where I am a typically easygoing person, and I don't try to create trouble for people, but sometimes they want to bring trouble into my life. And
show some teeth, huh?
Sometimes you have to show a little teeth. So and that's where the story of this design comes from. And they do hold a different kind of spirit to them. But unless I'm intentional, unless it's for a certain clan or telling a story, sometimes they just come out and they're their own spirit, and I don't really have the story for them.
So do you mean you purchased the drum and did you put the design on?
Correct.
And I see.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it came with the brown.
It did. I was a little bit. I was like, okay, but that's okay. It's still pretty. Yeah. Yes.
I've got two questions. Thanks for your talk. Wilhelm talked about expansive, distributed, and realistic design, and I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about those styles with the audience, and also whether or not you gravitate more towards one than the other, or you find one to be easier than the other to execute. And then secondly, during your time here when we were looking at things on exhibit and in collection storage, you really gravitated towards Charles Edenshaw's work, and you spent probably close to 2 hours looking at the compote that he made. That's in the gallery. I encourage everyone to go see it after this presentation. Can you talk about the inspiration you got from argillite pieces you saw here, including some of the ones in the back, Edenshaw as an inspiration for you, and anything else you'd like to share about what you saw here?
Yeah. Explain a little bit more about the Bill Holm aspect. I actually didn't. I have only looked at the pictures of his book. I haven't actually read his book. So.
Well, if I understand it correctly, my recollection is that there's expansive, distributive, and realistic design styles. And the realistic, for instance, would be a really easy to identify raven in a formline piece. And then distributive is when the formline elements that create the raven, they're present, but they're spread out with a little more blank space, and the elements are not as close together. This is a really simplified version. And then expansive is when the elements are so far apart from each other, or so designed with so much space that you can't necessarily identify what you're looking at. And so I was curious if you gravitated towards one of those styles, if one is more difficult for you to render than the other, and what your thinking on that is.
Yeah, I think for me those are like 3 different areas of well, okay, I think my favorite is expansive. It's a lot more challenging and imaginative, and so I would much rather be kind of in that realm. But for something that is easier for people to digest, that's where something like this comes into play. A lot of people want to come up and immediately have like, oh, that's a raven, or oh, that's an eagle, and they want to have that connection with the pieces, which is fine. But to me, I'd rather be playing in an area where I don't even really know what it is, but it just comes together. It's challenging. It's hard. It's not easy. This design, it took me hours to, and this was I replicated a piece that I saw in a different museum, and it takes so long to do just sketching it, let alone getting to the final draft. So, I could probably design this today, get it cut out, and then get a first layer paint on by tomorrow. This really, it's not very challenging to me, but I do have to appeal to my audience from time to time. So there is that aspect of wanting to be able to connect with people and allow them to connect with what I'm doing. So having the different levels it's important. It's important to do all 3, in my opinion. But if I were to play around in one for a while, but then 2, I get tired of that too, and I just want to do something that's easier and easier on my mind, and see if I can do something that everybody's done thousands of times, but do it in a little way that's different, and it has my kind of signature on it rather than a generic look. And then 2, yes, the Edenshaw and the argillite, pretty much strictly Haida. The argillite's found in Haida Gwaii, and but those pieces, they're so masterful pieces of argillite. It's super fun for me to look at.
And what is that, a carving? A rock?
It is. It's a rock.
Stone?
It's a stone. There's a black one. It's a blackish stone, and it's right. There's one right there. Yeah. So anytime I get a chance to look at, because they're usually like these dishes and this kind of oval shape, and they aren't square. They aren't, and so fitting designs into these different pieces, it's really challenging. So I feel like most every argillite piece, they're always challenging themselves, and I love having that opportunity to kind of see when people are playing in that third realm of, you can't quite tell what it is, but they put something together pretty masterfully. And then two, there's Charles Edenshaw. He's like every Northwest Coast artist or connoisseur knows who this is. There's one spoon, that carved spoon in the back, and then also an extremely beautiful piece in the gallery here. It is photographed in here. I don't have it marked off, but right here. So it's this piece right here, and it's just I'm at a loss for words at how masterful to bring in these 3D elements. It's it's got teeth, and it looks like it's got little claws, so I'd call this one a beaver. And the way he fills space has a lot of cross hatching and a lot of very fluid movements, which is something that I've been working on myself, is creating a more fluid piece. I used to be very stiff and rigid, and people would call that more of kind of an archaic Tlingit style. And I was pushed by his relative to move out of that style, or his descendant, one of his descendants, to move away from being so stiff and rigid, and kind of create this more flowy, more negative space. Negative space is the space that isn't filled in color. It's a little bit more. It's a little easier on the eyes, and it's easier to digest. And I don't know. I think it comes out a lot prettier instead of very bold and straight lines. So that's my direction, and I'm gonna act. And then two, this was homework for Robert Davidson, his descendant. I sent it to him, and was because he gave me other homework, and I sent him this one after I'd finished that, and then he went, "Great, start painting." Okay. So so that's where I'm at. Any other questions?
The other one I wanted to ask is, I noticed on a couple of these that the little curly, like the curly ears.
Oh, yep.
What is that about? Is that a signature thing, or because I don't think I've seen that before?
That is a way to signify as a thunderbird. So and it's got that beak that's really prolonged and hooked. You could, someone might maybe think it was an eagle, but with that little plume, curly Q at the end, that's to signify a thunderbird.
So both of them with the curly Q are
Yes. Yep.
But that's not a Tlingit design?
It is.
It is?
Yep.
Because I haven't seen a lot of.
You don't see a lot of them, but if you keep your eye out, you'll find a few.
We're not in Thunderbird territory. It's
Up near me. Yeah, my grandpa was Thunderbird, so that's where I get some of the inspiration. Actually, yeah, both of these were for relatives of mine, so yeah.
And you're Rango Kiksadi?
Yeah, but my grandpa's Shungu Katie Thunderbird from Haines, Daeshu, Chilkat, Klukwan area. Yeah.
You talked a lot about wanting, about your painting skills. What about carving and wanting to get into engraving? Are there a lot of artists that want to do all three or specialize, or talk a little bit about the different mediums you use, please?
Yeah. Really, it's a carved art form. So the same principles that are used for painting are the same principles that you use towards carving. So if you design correctly, then you could carve it out correctly. I don't know all the principles that go into 2D carving. So I'm at a place where I'm ready to, and I began to do some on my own. But I would really enjoy having opportunities. I've been knocking on a few artists' doors, like, hey, I'm ready to, do some carving if you need me. So, but I haven't had any takers yet. So, but a lot of artists do. They expand. They do different mediums and don't stick to just one. I guess engraving jewelry is a really good one because a lot of people. I mean, I've got this on, and I'm sure a few of you also have different engraved pieces on right now, and everybody's got them. So, and everybody loves them. So, it's a smart market to be in. There are other artists that have told me, like, hey, for your longevity, it's smart to do a month of engraving and then move on to your other pieces. So it's just a different way to keep yourself moving and going. Yeah.
You gotta pay the rent too. Right?
That's a fact. I love moose hunting and I love getting my own fish to feed myself through the winter, but a few vacations would be pretty nice too. So yeah.
Plus mud ball and Sitka.
Yes, I gotta make sure I can make it for mud ball too. So.
Any last questions before we wrap up?
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much, James.
Thank you.